Ready to dip your toes into the water with clean vehicles? We've got some tips and resources to share with you in just a couple minutes. But first, let me welcome you to another episode of The Route, School Bus Fleet's video and podcast series that keeps you in the know. I'm Amanda Huggett, your executive editor. Today we're going to cover news and trends in the pupil transportation industry. And then we're going to be joined by a special guest to talk about school bus electrification, so stay tuned to the end. Let's start rolling. Today, we're starting out with some sad news as we mourn the loss of another industry great. Terry Vander Aa passed away on January 17th. He was a longtime school bus contractor working for the company his father founded called Vancom. He's praised for his savvy business strategy and the growth that he brought the company. He was even one of our own Contractors of the Year in 1985. Now, Terry was a two-time president at NSTA. He served on the board of the Illinois School Transportation Association. Personally, he was passionate about prison ministry. So if you knew him or want to honor his legacy, memorial contributions can be made to Prison Seminary's foundation. You can find his full obit and the link to that on our website. Our next stop is with OEM Bluebird. In late January, the company announced a new CEO and president. John Weiskiel steps in on February 17th to lead the OEM strategy and growth. He succeeds previous leader Phil Horlock and brings with him automotive industry experience. Now, he did serve as GM for Bluebird Coach in Canada for 2 years in the early 2000s. Since, he's been at Magna International, and we're excited to see what happens from here for the manufacturer. Now let's check in with some recent acquisitions and expansions. Last month, on the contractor side, Student Transportation of America acquired 6 new bus companies. Most providers were services based in New York, but there was one in Arizona and another in Wisconsin. This adds 1,000 employees and nearly 900 vehicles to its national fleet. On the alternative transportation side, Everdriven has expanded into a new state, this time coming to Minnesota. Its entry into the market here marks its 34th state. Now, I say here because that's where I'm based, so yay, go Midwest. Hop Skip Drive also announced an expansion to Kansas City, where it's partnering with at least 2 school districts. Now, our last stop before the interview are some interesting survey results from School Bus Fleet's data gathering efforts. Our annual Special Needs Survey is in the February issue of our magazine, and the results offered a nuanced look at the shift in some special needs trends. Most interesting to me was that anecdotal conversations pointed to an increase in special needs ridership, but the data told a slightly different story. In last year's survey, 59% of respondents said that they saw an increase in special needs passengers, but this year it dropped to 51%. Now, maybe it means the trend is finally stabilizing, but it could also just be a fluke coming down to local ridership trends where respondents are located. But we'll keep tracking it. In other highlights, we also noticed that there are more students being mainstreamed, and there's a decline in the use of Type A and Type B buses. Now, driver pay is more equal, with more special needs drivers earning the same as general route drivers. More aides are also onboard special needs buses than last year, likely reflecting the trend of the driver and aide shortage beginning to slow. Meanwhile, most operators are now using video cameras on buses and child check reminder systems. But interestingly, rider tracking system use declined. Now, of course, challenges will always remain, but the driver shortage still ranked as the top transportation issue that our respondents are facing. New concerns, such as accommodating inconsistent dismissal times and the complexity of transporting out-of-state districts, gained prominence. But you can find the full results of the survey on our website, and lots more special needs content. Now, I want to get to a special interview for today's episode. I've got Alise Crippen joining us in a moment. Alise is the lead project manager on the electric school bus team at CALSTART, and she's here to share with you some tips on how to approach fleet electrification and some tools available to you from CALSTART. So here's our interview. Please enjoy. All right. Well, Alise, thank you so much for joining us on School Bus Fleets Throughout. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay, so we're going to start with a very easy question. Tell us about who is CalSTART, if there's anyone watching who's unfamiliar, how you serve the school bus market, and a little bit about your role.
Absolutely. So CalSTART is a mission-based nonprofit. We work with our over 200 member companies to advance clean transportation. So we connect every element of the industry with the ultimate goal of creating and changing transportation for good. So our electric school bus team works directly with school districts and industry partners to accelerate nationwide school bus fleet electrification. And so with our work, we're able to provide technical assistance, we're able to stay ahead of the latest market trends, and provide that real world information to connect fleets and give them the knowledge they need to electrify.
Perfect. And tell us about this electric school bus team and what you and your team kind of do to help those districts. What does that look like?
Right. So one of our programs is our Cal Fleet Advisor program, and that is a free technical assistance program for any school district in the state of California. And through that program, we're able to offer both simplified and custom tailored resources to any fleet at any stage of electrification, whether they're just starting to learn about what that really means, or they've already deployed 50 plus school buses. We can sit down with them, get to know their story and get to know their needs. And from there, set up those next steps in their electrification journey. And what that means is whether we're providing more information and resources, or we can help connect them with the connections with their utility, with the right partners and dealers, with other peers that have already gone through this process. Sometimes it helps to hear someone else's story of someone that's similar to you and how they went through that process. And we find that's often really helpful for fleets. And also we can do fleet electrification planning and a bunch of other stuff. So we try to help as much as we can in making this process as easy as possible. It's not an easy process. There are a lot of steps and there's a lot to unpack for a school district. And school districts, we recognize, have limited time and resources. And so we want to be able to hold their hand as much as we can through that process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for doing that. I know it's so needed. It's such a complex, sometimes overwhelming topic. So
Right.
there's people like you to help them. Okay, so with CalSTART's focus on clean vehicle adoption, you've probably heard some of the comments from skeptics. They maybe don't trust the technology yet, or they're ready, but they don't think that the infrastructure is quite there yet. What do you say to them?
So, as we just mentioned, even transitioning to an electric school bus is complicated, let alone any electric vehicle.
Yeah.
So to that, I say, skepticism is natural when adopting any new technology. And ultimately, electric school buses, electrification is still in an earlier stage of adoption, in an earlier stage of that technology development. I do want to highlight that, even with that early stage, battery technology is still advancing. Charging networks are expanding, and ultimately the benefits and value that electrification can offer are still tremendous, and we're still finding more and more benefits every day. I mean, the vehicle itself is going to offer a cleaner and quieter ride. And also it's just a more efficient vehicle to its core, if you look at it from even just a energy consumption perspective.
Yeah.
So we're also seeing tremendous growth in the industry at large. I know that it can be easy to, find the gaps right now.
Yeah.
It can also be easy to say, well, most of that development is happening in California, right? But actually, there is development going on nationwide. And one project I'd like to highlight is the I-95 corridor. So we have a project that is creating a plan to create that charging corridor, ultimately from the Port of Savannah all the way to the Port of New Jersey. And that plan is bringing together the partners and the stakeholders to create charging hubs all through that corridor. And that plan will also be replicable to create more charging corridors throughout the United States in time. So it is, setting the groundwork for those investments and that industry growth.
I kind of think the elephant in a lot of rooms right now is, there's been a lot of talk and lead up to electric vehicle adoption, but now things are a little unsure, right? With the new administration and talks of cutting funding, funding freezes, maybe cutting rebate programs, even regulations changing. What's your take on this and CalStart's approach?
Right. So let's certainly acknowledge that elephant in the room. It's been an exciting 2 weeks with this new presidential administration, and we are facing some real uncertainty right now. This administration issued a day one executive order that ultimately is steering away federal investment from the technologies that will define transportation and mobility in the 21st century.
Mhm.
So we as CalSTART will continue to work as much as we can with that federal level and also our state and local levels to find the levers to continue driving innovation and infrastructure investment and driving this industry forward. And let's also remember what's at stake here. Electrification ultimately is transportation innovation and technology development. And so it is critical for the US to move forward. And for the future of automotive technology, we cannot afford to take our foot off the accelerator in this industry. So otherwise, automakers from passenger cars to school buses are facing the real possibility of, missing out in this global competition for automotive development. So we are continuing to do everything we can to drive this industry forward. And I think even despite what's going on, industry will find a way to move forward.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
I'll find a way. So, okay, let's say there's a district who hasn't yet begun their electrification journey, but they're curious to start dipping their toes in the water.
Yes.
Where do they start?
Right. So if they're in the state of California, I certainly recommend they connect with our Cal Fleet Advisor program. Again, it's a free technical assistance program for any school district in the state. So we would work with them to make sure they have the knowledge they need in understanding all of the steps in electrification. And that goes from initial planning to obtaining funding to procurement, delivery, even all the way into then, okay, your bus is delivered. How do I train my drivers? How do I train my maintenance team? How do I ensure that we're charging efficiently and that we're optimizing this process as much as possible? So we can work with them through that process. If there is a fleet, of course, out of California, there are a few other technical assistance programs. One's in the state of New Jersey. There's a state-funded program there. There's another one in the state of Massachusetts. And then I'd also, again, like to highlight our ESB network for finding more of that information. But I also recommend working with your utility. That is a key step in this process. And we're finding that utilities are more and more prepared to support fleets. You're going to have to work with them in determining your site capacity and getting all of your infrastructure together and any kind of, additional infrastructure you'll need at your site. So we are finding that there are more and more utility programs available to help fleets through that process.
Awesome. So, okay, you have covered the technical assistance program already, but tell us more about how it works and who qualifies and where can someone even go to kind of start that process and that journey with you.
Fleets that would like to join the technical assistance program, they can go to our Cal Fleet Advisor website and we will meet with them and first get to know their fleet story and their fleet's needs. The number one need for any school district fleet is to get their kids to school. But what are the additional needs? I mean, every fleet is different in their routing, in, their network between schools, in their staffing. And so we like to sit down and understand that story. And then from there, we can start building out those next steps. So do we need to start looking at funding opportunities and piecing together how we can fund, buying a new electric school bus? Or do we need to look at how many chargers you're going to need, and will your site have enough capacity, or do we need to, bring in the utility, bring in some contractors and so on. So we start with that initial meeting and then we go from there because every school district is different and we want to ensure that this program is custom tailored to your school district's needs.
Right, and current fleet makeup and fuel types and all that too, right? Because
Absolutely.
you don't want to convert the whole fleet at once. And probably
Right. So for fleets that already are interested in understanding how they could electrify their whole fleet, we can also do fleet electrification planning and create the whole plan of how would I electrify my 80 school bus fleet? How would I electrify my 400 school bus fleet? And so with that plan, we take a look at every bus in your fleet and, the model age and based on model age and your needs, plan out how you can over time go through that procurement process and the process of your infrastructure upgrades and put all of that together in basically the full lifetime transition of your fleet. CALSTART ultimately is focused on creating a clean transportation future and creating clean air for all. And so our mission is to go zero emission. And so we primarily work for school busing, electric school busing, but we primarily work with zero emission technology. So electric, we do some hydrogen. So if a school fleet if we're working with them on a fleet electrification plan and they've requested that they would like to keep a certain number of their diesel fleet and they would feel more secure with that as well, which I understand with range anxiety for this current state of technology. We can certainly build that into the plan.
I want to ask you about what your reaction is to CARB abandoning the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. And do you think, does it spell anything larger for the industry, or what's your take on that?
So the future of zero emission transportation remains strong for the state of California and for other states as well. California has other tools that it can use to continue moving towards its emission reduction goals. There's also the Advanced Clean Trucks rule, which can stand alone from the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. It's a little confusing with similar acronyms, but ultimately the Advanced Clean Trucks rule is still setting ambitious goals for this transition. And California has other levers as well to maintain momentum, including incentives, including establishing voluntary agreements, and also continuing to drive forward infrastructure investments. So with California's decision to withdraw the ACF waiver, CALSTART is still pursuing both policy and market levers to keep driving momentum forward. And I will also say, we're confident the demand for the clean transportation movement is still a global driver that will only continue to grow.
Yeah, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, Alise, we've covered a lot of ground really quickly, but this was really interesting and informative. Is there anything else we haven't touched on yet that you think our viewers should know?
Just be sure to join our electric school bus network. That's my main shout out. And if you're in California, be sure to check out Cal Fleet Advisor. At the end of the day, we're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this work.
Thank you.
And thank you again for being on the show. It was so great to have you. We will link the information to the programs you mentioned in the description so that our viewers can read up more on that. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Alise, and please check out the links below to see the resources that she mentioned. That's it for today, but you can find more school bus headlines and hot topics on our website anytime. Be sure to follow our YouTube channel and connect with us on social media. We'll see you again soon for more episodes of The Route. Thanks for riding with us.